the short break we had, we have Dave Davies with us already. He's our next speaker, and I will quickly introduce Dave. Just give me 1 second. So, let me find my presentation. Sorry for that. Dave, how are you? How are
I
you
am just
feeling?
fine.
Energized,
I
energized,
am rearing and ready to go.
ready to go. Where are you connecting from? Because I know you are not in Europe, you are in US. So,
I am in the United States in Ohio,
mm-hmm.
between Cincinnati and Dayton, Ohio, if anybody's familiar with that part of the country.
Yeah, and what time is there for you?
9 a.m.
9 a.m. Okay, so we also started at 9 a.m. It's just 2 p.m. for us now. And I see people maybe went for a quick bite. But anyway, they should be here. So Dave Davis is a practitioner and recognized professional in project and program management, leadership, change management, and business acumen. Over the years, he has driven many initiatives in many areas, and that information can be found on the projectmanagement.com. So connect, see what he has already researched and presented there. For majority of you, it might be free. And let's hear it from Dave today about sustainability and agility. So thank you, Dave. The floor is yours. You can start presenting your slides.
Okay, are you able to see my slides?
Not yet. Now I see. Now we see.
Okay,
Thank you.
well, thank you. By the way, I've been dabbling a lot here lately with generating some of these graphics from AI, so uh, they're included in here. And I just posted my contact information in the chat. I was asked to talk about sustainability, and actually I want to start out. I've never met Lorenzo before, but I could have sworn we had talked a lot before we even had this, because I'm going to start out with sustainability using well, a little bit of introduction, but I'm going to be using the Discipline Agile module as far as where this goes, because sustainability, although we can do it in little pieces down at even at a story at a Scrum level or a minimal business increment or whatever we want to call it, it really needs to be enterprise wide, aligned with the value stream, et cetera. And it's broader than just the environment. It includes the social impact, the workforce well-being, viabilities, all those things. Especially, I'm sure it's happening in your area as much as it is in the States, the whole environmental impact of data centers and some of those things going on. And if we look at environmental sustainability and that, how does that fit in? And et cetera. So I'm going to hit on some of those things a little bit. And another major point I want to talk about, Agile doesn't compete with sustainability, it enables it. It needs to be a mindset across the organization. And agile teams make frequent small decisions. It's those all those small decisions that add up to an exponential implication of sustainability. So those small decisions are really uniquely positioned to embed the sustainability into the work. And it needs to be embedded into the work. And as I mentioned here, backlog prioritization, so as acceptance, as we define value in our backlog for what are we going to do in each iteration, we need to get more and more attuned of how does that fit in. And I'm going to many times here bring in the data center thing in that, because I don't know if any of you have seen ChatGPT says that they cost them over $10 million a day to have good manners on their ChatGPT, because frequently they'll get responses back, thank you, or something along the lines, I appreciate you doing this, blah, blah, blah. And it takes so many cycles and uses so much current work in order to do that, and electricity and cooling, blah, 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 that it becomes a very much a cost to doing business, but also a strain on resources and viability. So, not going to get into that in too much detail, but it's still a mindset that we need to be able to incorporate through all the small decisions. And it's no longer a policy statement, but it becomes a delivery habit. So let me go on next. As I mentioned before, Looking at discipline agile, by the way, I got this, I actually had a call. I was involved in PMI bringing in disciplined agile, actually quite a while ago, 2019, I think it was 2018, 2019. And when I got this, I decided I reached out to Scott Emlin, who's one of the founders of Disciplined Agile, and we had a couple nice long conversations of where does Disciplined Agile, and I apologize for this fast forwarding, where does Disciplined Agile support sustainability. And we found it supporting everywhere throughout the entire. This is a part of discipline agility called the square onion, but it brings in the entire enterprise. If you look down at the bottom, there's a foundation of which there's a mindset and ways of doing work and etc. And again, I apologize. I don't know what's going on, but it's automatically sharing before I'm ready to get rid of it. Um, but I also stuck in here a thing as we talked about AI, a few things of ML ops. So the whole DevOps and ML ops, of which Agile plays a part bouncing in and out of, is a factor in all this. So what I'm going to talk about today is looking at some of these into this holistic, from a top-down, enterprise-wide level, and where do these fit together? So with that being said, since this is automatically jumping ahead to me for me anyway, let me jump into some of the different areas where it is critical. And we started with the whole and street strategic intent needs to be focused around sustainability. And what is sustainability? And is it more than just being a good citizen? And I think the answer is yes. I think it has some significant bottom line impacts for the organization, but it needs to be at this level, this dirty word in Agile, scaling. We need to be able to scale across the enterprise for the sustainability. Because back to discipline agile, we're at the value stream here. We can be very scalable in one little piece of the of the value stream, but if the entire value stream doesn't work towards that, contribute to making it more sustainable and carry on the sustainability afterward, you're not getting your maximum value of what it is. So we need to have that strategic intent, and this does need to be at a leadership level, directs the behavior, the decisions, and the investments. One of upper management's job, and it goes down to the Scrum Master and every team member, is understanding what these guardrails are that we work in that directs our behavior, our decisions, investments, etc. And those guardrails have to have the sustainability factor defined within them. And I don't think we've done a good job of that, as good a job as we can, especially when we start to look at scaling. Um, I've heard the last couple presentations have done a good job of recapping some of the history of how Agile came about and how AI came about. And I appreciate the previous presentation that said, AI actually started in the 50s and conceptually those things have been there a long time. And how these fit in with not only the strategic intent, but also within the culture. So we need to make sure that our strategic intent shapes the sustainability, but our culture drives the long-term focus. We mentioned before, I think Ben had talked about, but by the way, hi Ben. Ben and I have known each other for many years along the lines, but how culture helps to drive that focus and it really reinforces it on a daily basis. Besides continuous learning, which I appreciate that term being used also, continuous growth, we need to have continuous reinforcement of these core values and the long-term focus. So the culture really determines what is our long-term sustainability versus short-term pressures to dominate priorities. Now, where does this fit into this? I'll bring in a little bit of a real world thing. Um, if any of you are very familiar with some of the AI capabilities and some of the models that use GPUs, which are very high intensive resource consumers, there may be a way of getting the same result, perhaps a little bit slower by using something other than a GPU. And so that's where we need to focus on what is it that we're trying to deliver and what is the true value or our true MBI, as I was talking about before. Are we, we need to be able to ask the question, are we using the GPU because it's sexy and maybe a little faster? Are we using because it's the best overall fit for what we're trying to deliver as an organization. And then that fits in again with understanding the business solution. So in order to be sustainable, we need to really understand what we're doing for the business to keep this sustainable. And by the way, I know sustainability is oftentimes focused on the environment and some of those things, but it's sustainability of everything. I mean, we're talking about sustaining our processes, sustaining keeping technical debt low, sustaining keeping our knowledge, and I heard that discussion earlier too, keeping our knowledge as current and available as possible. So when we use that word, and I'll air quote here, I don't like air quotes, but I'll use one any here. Anyway, as we talk about that term sustainability, it's like, in what domain are we playing? And the answer is all of them. And then finally, bringing these three bullet points above together, the alignment between strategy and culture. So as a whatever our role is, and I'll focus probably more on Scrum Master than anything else here because we are doing a focus on Agile. And by the way, a Discipline Agile Scrum Master is probably the worst name of a certification ever because one of the core components of Discipline Agile is your way of work. That based on what your goal is for an iteration, you will do different ways of work. And I think that really plays in sustainability because in Discipline Agile mindset, you may see that you're sprint after sprint after sprint, you're not being as efficient or getting velocities that you'd want on a certain component. And so you may take a couple hours or maybe even a day or two during an iteration to bring in specialists to educate the team. So the team has a better conceptual knowledge of what it is and how these all fit together for sustainability. So as we look at a disciplined agile senior scrum master, that's where that comes in is enterprise wide being able to bring things in not only for the product we're developing, team development, overall knowledge, understanding, capturing, and being able to help that transformation. And I'll, since we've used AI a couple times, I'll bring that into the picture here too, and I'll use it as a touch point. The literacy. Uh, Overall literacy of whatever it is, including sustainability literacy. But I saw a Gartner presentation fourth quarter of last year where they talked about the biggest challenge to AI for enterprises today, especially agentic AI, is the AI literacy across the enterprise. If we don't have a literate workforce, even if they're not directly involved in the AI, we're all indirectly involved, we're going to have difficulty realizing the return on investment or the value. And by the way, the value here in the Discipline Agile and our whole sustainability approach is at the value stream. It probably cannot be ROI based on reduction of headcount at different levels through the organization. It's being able to make decisions quicker, more empowered people with augmented tools to be able to make higher value decisions quicker with better data and the data organized better for them to be able to consume it easily and to be able to quickly analyze and give a response. So those are all within here, within the strategic intent and how it drives this. So if we don't have that mindset, we're probably not maximizing what we can do. And by going back and making sure we all understand what is going on here, why are we doing this, we can be more sustainable on our, again, our products, our processes, and our customer relationships. So let me go in next one, the importance of sustainability in systems. So I'm going to look at it here as a little bit from a system perspective. Most project management, I use the term most, and some people in construction may disagree with me, have a software component to them. So sustainability fits into the operation resilience. One of the things on the Square Onion earlier, I brought in the ML ops. I don't know how many of you are familiar with the new PMI certification, the CPMAI, which is I think the term now is cognitive project management on AI. It's year and a half old, if that, within PMI, and they talk a lot about ML ops as opposed to a DevOps, but they're both taking the same approach. That there's that relationship between the development and the operation that they contribute to each other. So if you need to understand what's going on in operations. Operations needs to understand what's going on in development, and the two need to work together. So that sustainability within operation resilience needs to be there. And I heard risk mentioned in the previous presentation. And this is, we don't talk about this too much, but really risk does have short-term, long-term impacts and how they should be analyzed. Because remember, risk has two big components. One is probability, and other is impact. And then there's also that overall cost to the business of if the risk is realized. So we need to search some of the risk of maybe some short-term efficiencies. Any of you that have ever been in a Scrum world developing from a continuous flow with every couple weeks introducing something into production that meets a minimal uh, viable product, whatever, we oftentimes do trade off a longer term item with a short term item. We may call that technical debt or some other thing, but we still have those things. So we need to constantly factor that in. And wow, what am I doing? I'm bringing in another component we need to factor in, factor in, factor in. And I'll piggyback on a question the previous, where is AI going to fit in on all that? It's going to be able to augment a whole bunch of stuff together on these multiple channels and give us augmented information so we can apply more critical thinking to be able to make sure we understand where our best value is to go and to coach and work with the team in order to understand that and implement it. Another big part in this was sustainability, even before AI became sexy and cool, ethics. We need to do ethical things. Responsible AI is the term for it, but just responsible sustainability. And if you're in a manufacturing environment, that has to do things with reduction of waste, being lean, keeping things out of the queue so we don't have long wait times. And that's done through workflow management, process automations, and all that. I, I'm involved in a health department, a children's hospital in Cincinnati, with the enterprise uh, business systems. So we implement products like Workday and UKG and ServiceNow and some of those other things. And those are all configuration management. We don't necessarily write requirements or develop code too much. We're more of a, I'll use the term citizen development organization, where we're configuring tools and capabilities within these products. So we need to make sure that we're doing those efficiently, but also ethically supporting it. And that comes back to the enterprise-wide sustainability. Um, we need to have that awareness of what I do here, what may it be impacting in other applications or processes in our organization. I'm going to jump for just quickly here for a second. One of the other things, especially if we get into agentic AI, and I'm working on right at the moment, is developing an RFP for orchestration across agents. And if we have, I'll use my little example. If we have a ServiceNow agent, AI agent, a Workday AI agent, and a UKG AI agent, how do they all play together? How can we manage those from a single space? How can we make sure they don't get into quote shootouts unquote, where one product says this, the other product says that, and another agent somewhere else is trying to figure out which one's right. All those things are in there, and it's all part of sustainability to be able to manage, control, etc., increase reliability predictions, etc., across the enterprise and sustain that to keep down the technical debt. So I'm back again to my value stream integration. So as we look at sustainability, how are we sustaining these wins through the value stream? And it's end-to-end sustainability. It's quite possible that one piece of the value stream contributes a small amount, but it's so exponentially grown upon if it's able to do two other steps in that value stream to get better input before it starts. And in order to do some of these things, we need to understand the key factors. And those span a lot of things, not just business-wise, but clearly business-wise. But the architecture, security, can't speak enough about security. We see things all the time about data leaks and et cetera. And our security folks that are constantly fighting disrupted poison prompts, et cetera, in an AI world, but still ransomware, lots of different things, phishing expeditions, all those things that the security is constantly doing. And we need to have those in mind as we do this. Cross team considerations, the people process and all that. So aligning teams and processes. How does that fit into sustainability? Do we as a agile development team and a PMO, do we orchestrate these discussions? I don't think we own them, but I think we become a key player in there, and we may drive some of these things. I'll go back again to the literacy component. We may have a better view of where the literacy needs are than other folks in the organization. So we may want to drive some of these literacy discussions. And I'll use a model, a Kaizen model, of which is a process management improvement perspective of the enterprise operations. And it can maybe a little bit of a, use an American cliche, the tail wagging the dog, where we still have those capabilities we need to worry about. And then the sustainability in both the data and AI. The CPMAI certification, core concept number one, data is what drives everything in AI. And I think I mentioned, heard somebody before talk about nobody has 100% perfect on their documentation, knowledge, et cetera. We clearly don't have 100% good data. Um, what we need to do within our agile work is make sure our data is good. So it can handle whatever AI bots in there doing things. If there's a gap in the data, we're able to make sure the models are trained that it doesn't go crazy in hallucination to try to give an answer. Again, not to pick on AI, but AI is hot right at the moment. AI's main purpose is to satisfy you and give you an answer. Not doesn't really know if it's a right or wrong answer, wants to give you an answer. And that's why at the bottom of all chat GPTs and stuff, it sees a thumbs up or thumbs down. It wants to give you an answer you're satisfied with. So that sustainability sort of fits in there. How can we make sure that the satisfied answers fit the business need? So I'm going to jump into a little bit of the green ML ops, which I talked about before, but that's moving beyond accuracy and any costs include the carbon efficiency and the economic durability as core deployment requirements. And also we have another issue right now we need to worry about with some of the global things going on about the relationships and the risks that are inherent in some of these with international or inter-country exchanges of information or ML ops. So the operational sustainability in the pipelines, the shifting, the carbon intensive APIs, there's some things going on. Do we do more wind power? Do we do more green energy or less green energy? Some of those things. Where does the corporation fit into that? Where are our values as a corporation? The optimization on inference about the quantization and pruning, making sure that we don't bring over all the data. So we have to filter out a lot of stuff in the models, make sure the models are lean and crisp with the data they're dealing with. Preventing waste, that monitoring model drift or data drift, and make sure that we have it as current, as efficient as possible. And these are all things that we should be looking at as long as technical debt through each iteration we do in a software development scrum model, but also if you're running an assembly line. I mean, they have daily stand-up meetings and et cetera. And assembly, they have gimbal walks that go around and look at how well are we doing with our metrics based on targets, et cetera. And then I hate this term, but I got to use it, and that's the right sizing. Smaller language models for specific tasks to lower the total cost of ownership is again part of that sustainability. And here I put it within the ML ops model. So pulling back a little bit before we get down to an iteration specific, big picture, our epics, and I'm pulling a little bit of lean safe in here as far as the epic at the portfolio management. We need to have those be sustainability focused. We'll frame those different pieces, reduce impact over time. By the way, I'm going through some of these kind of quick. I know there's a lot of text on some of these slides, but it's for in case, and we'll find a way to get you these slides. If you need to, you can email me and I'll send you a copy of them. So you can refer back and there's more data on the slides than I'm covering, but I try to hit the bullet points here. And this stuff is nothing new here at all. Where we need to be in the big picture, sustainable, reduce impact over time. The strategic alignment, I've already talked about that 3 or 4 times here, but the links specifically to the ESG, the environment, social, and governance, which are the 3 pillars of sustainability. And then our efficiency metrics, how do we define success and measurable resource? We can't ignore measurable metrics. Well, metrics and measurable metrics can be redundant, but what we're measuring on this stuff, and then the long horizon flexibility. So we're not completely locked into everything because we need to be not just agile, but also nimble. And then all this kind of leads, and this is what Scott and I spent a lot of time talking about, that definition of ready before we really even get to the first sprint. We need to have a lot of things. And this, I'll go back to the CPMA model. They talk very much about data understanding, data preparation. Until you have those done, until you have an agreement from everybody that the data is committed, you can't move beyond there. You can't go with the understanding, oh, well, we'll get it in 3 weeks, so we'll go with the assumption we've got it. No, we need to have that verified. We need to understand our technical constraints. And I'm just putting green in here because I'm focused on sustainability. To prioritize the estimated backlog. Um, this is kind of a generic 2 weeks worth of user stories defined. And you may not even use user stories. Whatever you do to define the work that needs to be done and the success criteria for that, access to tools, and then the acceptance criteria. And these are basic, agile, iterative things, because there were agile things long before Agile Manifesto was written. Back in the 80s, we were talking about rolling wave planning. We had stand-up meetings and all those things. So a lot of that stuff has been around before, way before the Agile Manifesto. And then the acceptance criteria. Again, that's a core component of the Agile Manifesto piece as we went to an agile approach of doing work, of which now, with the discipline agile idea, the way of work does weave a lot of those pieces together. So here's an example pretty quickly of a backlog story. And the only thing that really changes in here um, is the so that. So as a team member, blah, 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 I want an LLM with the smallest electronic footprint possible so that our company sustains its commitment to plan alignment. Um, just keeping it mindful, keeping it current, keeping it focused, that sustainability needs to be a part of all our conversations for what we're delivering in a project. And there's some on the backlog. I'm just using some examples here. Sustainability focused, the ESG awareness, that we probably have a standard template or depends on your maturity. And I do apologize for a giggle is not agile. But as I mentioned before, I like to generate a lot of my graphics through the use of AI. And AI and spelling there's still gaps. And then what are the tasks that drive the change? So as we do our iteration planning and decide what is it we're going to commit to for this iteration, we need to understand these different pieces. And then finally, the whole idea of technical debt does play a part in the sustainability. So as we look at sustainability of product and et cetera, with an agile, we need to understand the technical debt relationship to sustainability. And we break this down a little bit more into the data debt. And then they have also things there for debt management and the benefits of proactive debt handling. And that one I know is always out there and implied, but it's making it again more awareness. I'm doing lots of things where I talk about awareness. Understand. Next, guardrails, leadership, and navigating trade-offs. Here I'm going again, jumping up from a team that's doing the actual iterations development to the leadership guardrails. The micro compromises that we understand these compromises we make day in, day out, we're making decisions, and that we make decisions in alignment of sustainability. Guardrails. Guardrails are established by management, by the business direction, the strategic intents. We need to make sure we work within those guardrails. As a quote, scrum master, unquote, your job is to make sure that the work we do stays within the guardrails and that is necessary. You ask the questions, is this within the guardrails? And not generic like the guardrail, but maybe a specific guardrail. And then operational ethics, always been there, but again, every now and then asking that question. I've been involved in teams that after they're there for a while, they don't ask those fundamental questions. And I'll use that drift term again. We might drift a little bit where we're maybe doing some short-term compromises with a long-term impact. We need to make sure that every now and then we just bring that conversation back, bring that conversation back. Does it cost our immediate velocity? Absolutely. But we should not be worried about just immediate velocity. We need to worry about long-term viability and overall cost of ownership. So that's where balancing these trade-offs comes in. And then talked about all these, but just as a slide, it's part of strategic framework, strategic alignment, future trend and preparedness, and the leadership and continuous innovation. So with that being said, thank you. I know I went a little bit over here, but a final slide sort of sums all this up. I'll just read the bottom line. Agile ways of working can embed sustainability into everyday delivery. So thank you. I'm not sure.
Thank you
Again,
so
here's my
much, David.
contact information, and I guess if you want to do
Thank
a
you. It
QR
was
code, you can hook up with.
Yeah, you can drop your LinkedIn in the chat so you can stay connected with the participants. It was really, really interesting. I love the spin with the sustainability and not just the climate, let's say, dimension of sustainability. There is a question on in the chat for you regarding Agile Sustainability Manifesto. If you have time to answer it, you need to scroll up to find it. And thank you once again for being here and for sharing from your great, great knowledge and experience. Thank
I'm
you.
going to jump into the chat here real quick. Um,
Yeah, you
what was
can.
the
We
question
need to.
again?
You need to scroll up. It's something about Agile Sustainability Manifesto released from Agile Alliance. So it was a question. So yeah,
Wow,
you can find it in the
that's a many minute question to answer.
yeah, it is.
Um, I'll say this much: it is evolving and growing. When I look at my crystal ball and the tea leaves, I think we're going to get away from agile, waterfall, defining all those. I don't think we'll use the term hybrid, but we're going to be have a set of skills and competencies and quote even tools that's going to support all those based on our context of where we are. So
Yeah,
it's the way I work back to the way I work, what's my goal and what's the best way to meet this goal. By the way, one other short comment. I'm not a believer in best practices. I'm a believer in most appropriate practices. And I think that's where we're going to be, the most appropriate process in order to meet that immediate need.
yeah.
And
An
what
involving
documents will
practice.
support these? All of them.
Yeah.
None of them, yet all
Thank
of
you
them.
so much. Thank you, Dave. Thank you so much
Okay, thank you.
for your presentation. And let's stay in touch, please. If you want to connect with Dave, share your LinkedIn. And let's move to the next to the
Yes.
next speaker is Casey. Yes.